you to sleep with the intricacies of drones. The second one would be, I'm not a drone expert. So at any point you feel it's necessary to drag myself or First Maxfield into a courtroom, I have no recollection of that presentation, Your Honor. So that's where we're at here. Primarily, the biggest reason we got a drone and got into this was for safety. Two-story and steep pitch roofs are always a challenge. The world we're living in, again, back to lawyers and lawsuits and stuff, we all want to avoid that as best we can. And so we felt that it was in our best interest to take our adjusters out of that harm's way as best we can. And so we've brought it on board. I'm also going to go through some of the things we did right and things we did wrong along this process, and what we are actually using it for and what we thought we would use it for, just to try to give you a little bit more practical, adaptation to your business in particular. So with that being said, let's dive into the wrong. Where did Dan mess up in this process? The first one I would say would be Kespre. And this is in no way degrading Kespre as far as what they do and what they offer in certain market segments, but specifically to insurance, to sum it up, it's just not quite there. It was founded by he was a grad student at Stanford, that this was his research project for his graduate degree. And it started off, they were mapping aggregate piles for mining companies. So literally like sand and gravel. And they could use elevation and dimensions to extremely accurately tell them how many tons of any given product they had on the ground. That transformed very well into the agricultural world when you've got commodities companies that pile up grain in a similar fashion. So it works really, really well for that. When they were trying to expand their marketplace to other entities, insurance got brought into that. And so they were able to take this technology and use it when it comes to roofing. When it comes to measuring a roof, they are Hague certified for their measuring capabilities. It's incredibly accurate. And it would be very, very similar to what you would get with like an Eagle View or something like that, showing you the number of squares, the amount of valleys, ridge cap, things of that nature, drip edge. And it does a very good job of giving you a nice printout. Again, very similar to Eagle View, Sky Measure, some of the other ones that are on the market. And so it did do that quite well. What we were looking for and where it essentially really failed us, I guess, they had convinced me that their hail mapping software that they had was supposed to be as good as a Hague adjuster. In fact, we actually found publications that they had put out after the fact, where they had, I shouldn't say after the fact, before we bought on, and then I presented this to them later, stating that, they made claims that they were as accurate as say like a Hague certified adjuster to look at things. And so we really justified the dollars and cents on our end. Everybody hates this, perpetual argument that you have with hail chasers and storm chasers over what is and what isn't damage. And so if we could have a product that had an accuracy rating of a Hague certified adjuster, for example, it would help eliminate that argument. Ultimately, it just didn't do that. And I don't want to be pessimistic because technology is amazing. And yet I don't believe in my heart that it'll ever get to a point where it can clearly distinguish what is and what isn't hail. Specifically to the Kespre drone, we had a metal Decra roof on one of our employees' houses that we went and flew shortly after we got it. The roof was 2 to 3 years old, and it brought up potentially, 853 hits on this roof that had never seen a hailstorm. It was picking up every leaf, every twig, every watermark, any discoloration in the roof as a potential. And then they wanted you to filter through those, look at them individually, and determine whether that was or wasn't hail. That's cumbersome, and that's not efficient at all. And so that quickly became, an issue for us. the measuring aspect of it was great, but I'll get to the dollars and cents in a minute. It certainly wasn't going to pay for itself by that alone. I know that Grinnell uses this on the commercial side for some of those larger commercial buildings and things, and they've had some good success with that. Paul Boonstra was a good advocate for us as far as, or resource, I should say, to work with. He was advocating for the Kesprey drone because of the success they've had, but I'm struggling to see where it translates to the residential world that we deal with, just for the lack of accuracy in measuring hail damage specifically. So that was some of the faults that we found in it, I guess. Now let's get into the real ugly part. This Kesprey drone starts off at $40,000 a year. You don't own any equipment. That is just the use or the rental of this and the use of the software that comes with it. We negotiated with them down to $35,000 for, again, 1 year. That was it. And then you renew, and again, it's $35,000. I know that Grinnell, buying multiple units and stuff, they were able to negotiate a better price. Again, I'm going back to dating a couple years ago. I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 to $27,000 per unit that they were getting. But again, a large dollar figure. If you were to crash that drone or have an issue with it, it was essentially a $5,000 deductible to repair it. They could go in and determine whether that was your fault or whether that was the drone or the software's fault. And what I mean by that, another reason, and I'm going to go through a couple of these, that Grinnell really likes those, the individual that is considered the operator really doesn't fly the drone themselves at all. You literally have an iPad and you tap in the grid and you can adjust it accordingly, and you tell it to go, and it will configure a flight pattern, and it takes off on its own. It flies a low pass and then moves up and flies a higher pass, taking pictures all along the way. And then it takes all those individual pictures and puts them together into a giant puzzle, so you can see an entire overview of the whole roof. You can zoom in on specific locations if you're looking for things. Again, the quality of the photography, some of the capabilities it does are really amazing. But ultimately for us, how we justified that dollar figure was, again, to try to ward off that inevitable argument with these hail chasers. And it was never going to do that for us. In fact, it probably worked the opposite. If we were to present that report to an insured, we would look like we've got egg on our face, because we wind up arguing that, okay, yes, it's pointing these out, but these are not, hail hits essentially. And so that was fairly easy for us after that first year to move past that. Then when you delve into the internet and you start looking at what's available out there for different drones on the market, the one that kept coming back to us was this drone specifically that I've got next to me here. It's a DJI Phantom 4. It's actually a Phantom Pro 4 version 2 to be specific, but it's really kind of an industrial grade drone, for lack of better terminology. It's not the smallest, it's not the biggest, it's not the fastest. It's, there's things limitations that it has, but really for business type purposes that like we're doing, it is really kind of the standard, I guess, or very industrial, I guess is what I would say. The picture quality that it takes is amazing. You can zoom in on things. You can get the stability of it as well. When you're in strong winds, for example, and things, it's a very, very stable unit. It doesn't float around a whole lot. You can take your fingers off the controls, which is right here, and just let it hover, and it'll do that incredibly well. Much more cost effective. We are all in on this unit with the visible screen, which was a big thing for us. We really liked that a lot. Extra batteries, a case. I think we've got an extra set of propellers, not that we would need them, but all in, I want to say we're somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,400. You could do it for less if you didn't get all the extra batteries and things. Flight time varies a little bit depending on winds and things, but you know, as far as roof inspections go, you can easily do 4 to 5 or more roofs depending on the size without a problem. You can go to a farm and do multiple buildings and not have any issue, you know, running out of battery life. And it'll give you plenty of warning too to bring it back in when it does start to go down on power and things. But again, you know, at $2,400, let's say, give or take, it's a much better price point. And we feel like long term, if we get to where we're using them more, we would just add multiples. You know, we don't, at this point, we don't have one in each of our vehicles. It's not necessary, but it is a doable if we get to that. Let's see, it also gives you on that screen, it gives you things like your elevation, your direction. It'll give you warnings if you're getting into like wind gusts that are excessive and things. So it's got a lot of safety features built into it. It's got sensors on the unit that help keep you away from obstacles, you know, whether that be trees or buildings or whatever. Things like power lines are always going to be a little bit of an issue, but generally speaking, for how we're using it, it's right in front of you. You know, you can see where it's at, and if you're paying attention at all, you're gonna steer clear of that kind of stuff. And again, if I go back and compare it to the Kespre that had a $5,000 deductible, well, essentially, Randy's okay if we crash this thing twice. You know, we're still just out our original deductible with Kespre. So, you know, just it's a free for all pretty much. Let's see, some of the things that, one more thing on this drone. This, like right now, it's so extremely cold, we can't fly it. It's really not designed to fly under 32 degrees or under a freezing point. Not to say that you can't do it. We have done it. It is going to suck battery. You're going to have less battery life. And again, that's partially their way of protecting themselves as well. If you do have an issue and it's, you know, as cold as it is out today, you know, they're not going to claim any responsibility to it. You're pretty well on your own, which essentially when you buy a unit like this, you are on your own anyway. But they have to put those standards in place. The same with wind gusts. It'll give you warnings when it's exceeding, you know, I think it's rated for like 22 mile an hour. And we have flown it, you know, certainly in stronger winds than that. It will float a little bit more around with those wind gusts and things. It can do it. Just going to use more battery and things, but you got to be reasonable with it as well. If you're getting up to 30 and above, just wait, you know, don't fly it. Would be my thoughts on it. One thing that Kespre, they did help us with was the testing part of it. And I don't want to make light of that at all. This is, it's not a gimme at all. There's no need to bring your crayons to this test because you won't need them. It is the study guide, for example, and this is the remote pilot test. It's about an inch thick. It's extensive. I mean, this is basically the paperwork side of your pilot's license. And the reason the government or the FAA is requiring drone operators for business purposes to have this certification is because, number one, they just want you to respect the airspace that you are flying in. Pilots of all sizes of aircrafts, they have legitimate concerns that, you know, they could be doing everything right and this drone is going to get in their way and wreak havoc on their, you know, flight. And so I understand that. I do think it's a little bit overboard, especially when, you know, Joe homeowner can go buy a drone at the toy store and go out and fly it all over the place with little or no restrictions. But again, for business, if you're using it for business purposes, you've got to have this operator's license, and it's quite a test. It starts off with more of your simpler questions, which are going to be things along the line of like the weight limit of the drone itself, or size, you know, limitations, operating times, sunrise, sunset, maintaining visual sight of the drone, having, you know, a minimum of 3 miles of visibility to fly in. They don't want you flying when it's, you know, foggy out or something like that to where you could lose track of it. And things like, you know, height restrictions of not going over 400 feet. those are what I'm going to call the more basic questions. You simply, memorize essentially a lot of that stuff. Where it gets much more complex from the testing aspect of it is when you start dealing with all the different airspaces around airports. You've got class A, B, C, or A, B, C, D. Then you've got G, which is anywhere. And so again, in this guide, I'm going to try to do this. I don't have a PowerPoint, but you can kind of get an idea there and see all the different, you've got to know what those airspaces are, how they relate to the airport, where you're at in reference to that airport. It gets pretty complex. You also get into like sectional charting. I'm going to show you that. This is the same sectional charting that a pilot is going to use flying an aircraft. And this is actually today, everything of course is computerized, but they still have to have the ability to go back and do this. So I'm going to try and show you if I can zoom in there. It's intense. I mean, it's ridiculous what you get into, heights of towers and things in the area. This is none of which is anything you're ever going to deal with flying a drone. But again, respecting the airspace that you are flying in, they want you to be knowledgeable on this. Reading a METAR, which is basically a weather report. And this is given in, there's different types of weather reports, but I just want to show you this one to give you an idea of how complex they are. It'll give, where it says example and where I've highlighted in green, this is the breakdown. This is what you would receive. And then you've got to figure out how to decipher what the heck that all means. I don't know if you can see that at all. But it starts off, it's KGG 161753Z auto, 140 21 G, 26 KT. Okay, what that means, for example, it means it's Greg Community Airport for the 16th day of the month. The time is 1753 Zulu, which is again a worldwide. It's the same time anywhere in the world. It's giving the wind speed is 140 at 21 knots, coming out at 140, 21 knots with gusts up to 26. It's really, my point is it's really complex, and it's stuff that's going to require a fair amount of study time to do that. It's doable. I did it, so you can do it, obviously. But we had on staff a couple of years ago when we took this a former Air Force pilot. He scored one more on it than I did, and he thought it was tough. It's not a gimme. It's something that's going to take a little time, and I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form to discourage anyone from doing it. You can do it. It's not that bad, and yet you're going to have to study for it. It's a tough test. The other thing is that license is good for 2 years, and it's my understanding that you take the whole test over again. It's not something you can do Con Ed for or take a refresher. You just got to take the whole test again. I'm telling you, mine is due, and I'm not real excited about that because I'm going to have to go back in and study this to bring myself back up to speed with what it's going to take to pass that test. Kespre did have a program to kind of help give us that, but ultimately, this guide that I showed you, you can go online right now and print that off the FFA website. They'll give you all that information. There are several extremely good YouTube videos with guys that go through it, break it down, pull up those sectional charts and those airspace maps and go through it and explain it with you. You've got to know how the traffic flows at an airport, which is actually kind of interesting for anybody that flies. You get stuck, going around an airport, waiting for a runway to open up. They go into why you're doing what you're doing, and it's kind of fascinating in that aspect of it. But it's pretty intense. There's a lot to it. Let's see. Other than that, there is you get into atmospheric pressure, you get into uneven ground surface heat that it makes a difference on your lift and things of that nature. And again, not a scare tactic. You can do it, some of the newer rules and regulations that have come out recently, and some of you have maybe seen some news blogs on it, they really don't apply to us for what we're using it for. They deal more with flying over top of crowds and vehicles. There's also some things coming out as far as identification, so that having your drone sending out a signal that other people or other, like say airplanes, can pick up and know who you are, who's flying that drone. Because right now, if I were out doing something illegally with my drone, unless they know where I'm at, when I'm flying this, there's no way to link me back to it necessarily. And so that's something they are coming out with as well. Another thing, I'm going to kind of jump back to the KESS brief for a minute. Another aspect of that was very appealing to Grinnell, kind of more on the liability side of things. That drone had a fixed camera that shot straight down. So it was only good for getting above a structure and taking essentially pictures of the roof of that structure. And from a liability side, they liked that, so that if they're flying over an apartment complex, for example, they would try to notify the people that live in that they're going to be doing this, give them fair warning. But ultimately, if someone came back and tried to file suit saying, hey, they had this drone out and they were taking pictures of me through the window or whatever, they could very quickly come back and dispel that and say, it's not possible. Our drone physically will not do that. It only shoots straight down. Again, problem with that for us, here we want to take it out and use it on inspections and things, and you cannot make that take a picture of the side of a building because it just physically won't do that. It wasn't possible. So this drone, again, much more capable. You can stick it in pretty tight areas, and you can get on any angle or any side that you want. You can adjust the camera accordingly, and you can take really, really great imagery, from up above there, and not have any limitations other than you've got to get permission from the individual's property that you're flying it at, and make sure that they're okay with it, and then have your employees put themselves in a position where they're not being questioned for doing something, like taking pictures of people through windows or things like that. Be respectful of the property owner that you're doing this for. Our intentions in getting this were to use it obviously for again, as I mentioned, safety purposes, 2-story and steep pitch roofs, but we also wanted to use it more so on the inspection side of things. You pull up to a large farm, be a lot nicer to stand in the middle of the driveway and fly this thing around rather than, hoofing through the snow and things to try and get these pictures. It's limiting because, we were doing a couple of large farms yesterday, and I'm out in knee-deep snow trying to get some good imagery. I couldn't fly the drone anyway because of the temperature. It was just too cold. The other aspect of it is a lot of times we don't call ahead when we do inspections. We've got a sticky note we put on the door to make people aware that we were there and this is what we were doing. But we work inspections in along with claims and our daily activities, I guess. And so for us to call ahead and try and schedule appointments, it's not the way we do it. Not that that's right, wrong, or otherwise. It's just we don't consider it to be overly efficient. There's more often than not, we get there and people are at work. They're not around. And so they're not there for us to get that permission to fly it. And we don't feel comfortable doing it without their knowledge, to do that. And so, so we don't. If we do get them on the phone or something, then we can ask and we can do that. So we're not using it on the inspection side to the point that we thought we would. But we do definitely use it again for those trickier roofs. People have been very accepting of it in general. Customers like it. It's new fancy technology, and they're buying into it, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's not, to me, the industry in general does not like the term drone. Drones were brought into the spotlight a lot with the success of them in the military and on the battlefield. And so the industry feels like if we call it a drone, people think, guns and warfare and whatever else. They would prefer them to be called, UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, which to me just sounds like code for UFO. So we're not going to shoot you with our guns, but our aliens are coming to get you. So it just, whatever. It's a drone to me. It'll always be a drone. And I don't mean that in any bad way because we're not putting guns on it. But other than that, we've had good luck with it. It's been, this has been a really good solid unit, does what we want it to do, and flexible. Setup time on it, I mean, maybe 2 to 3 minutes at best. I mean, literally you pull it out of the case, you set it down, you fire it up. It takes longer for the thing to load up, which again is not long, and clear through your safety checks quick, and away you go. You're off and flying, and it's very easy to fly. There's simply a trigger on the back side of this unit. So obviously your 2 thumbs are driving it. You get to the point you want to take a picture, you click that, and it just literally clicks, and it'll do that on the display screen as well. It'll click, and for a split second, it'll show you the picture you got so that you can verify you did indeed get the picture you wanted. When you're done, you come back. It's a simple SD card that goes into the back of the unit. You pull that out. You can either tether it to the computer, or if you've got a computer that's got a card reader in it, you stick it in there and you download your photos, and away you go. It's very, very user-friendly, very quick, easy, and you move on with your day. So other than that, that's really about all I've got. Randy said you guys were a group that had a lot of questions. You just love to ask questions. So if anybody's got them, hit me with them.
Dan, John Paul, is this a written waiver or a verbal waiver, or it depends upon who you approach on an inspection or claim?
So far for us, John, we've just done a verbal waiver, and everyone's been fine with that. We don't go into great detail. I mean, I just say, hey, we've got a drone. We would like to fly it just to try to get some better imagery of what we're looking at. And most people are like, yeah, that's great. I think we had one individual that said, that was a little hesitant and asked if he could be there. And we said, sure, that's fine. We set up the appointment. And then when we got there, he just wanted to see it fly. He was really excited. He's like, this is really cool. So no one really has been very, very well accepted, I would say. So, yeah. Good to see you, John.
Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing? Hey, there he is.
Hey, question for you. So
yeah,
when you guys apply for waivers around like Class Echo or Class Delta airspace, how has that process been going from the home screen when you go digitally request that waiver from ATC?
Honestly, I don't know that we've had to do that. We've been pretty good. If we get into restricted areas, we generally just, again, for efficiency purposes, we just jump on the roof and go and don't use the drone. Yeah, I really can't answer that because I don't know that we've done that. I'd have to ask, some of our other adjusters just to verify whether they have. I personally have not. And kudos to you. Appreciate your help with this, Mike, as well, when we were trying to figure out what we wanted for a drone. So. Anybody else got anything?
Hi, Dan. Suzanne at Farm and Home Mutual.
Hi, Suzanne.
We've had a drone program for 4 years. I'm at my 3rd test coming up this month. Yikes. Yeah. So I wondered what your thoughts are on the new drones requiring the RID, because we're very close to purchasing, but we don't think we should because we have to buy a new drone in a year if the FAA,
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on it, I would think where DJI is out in the market, that just because that's what we've got, I would think that they would come up with something that, would be adaptable to what we've got to make it function. I don't think they're going to leave people high and dry. Again, in all honesty, I don't know for sure. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. And again, what Suzanne is referring to is they want the drones to be able to give off a signal so people know who's operating that drone, essentially. And in our case, it would come up First Maxfield Mutual and probably the drone operator at the time, which you log in and do that. And so, yeah, I would think they would make it adaptable, but I really don't know. That will be interesting moving forward. And I think it's a good thing though too.
Yeah, and we have the same drone, the Phantom 4, and I agree. It's just a very durable drone. Performs well in the wind, and the price is right. So.
Yep. I'm trying to think. I think Blaine flew it into a picnic table one day, and I flew it into something else, and a wing popped off, and we popped it back on, and away it went. So yeah, it's been really good. We've really enjoyed it.
Hey, Dan, just to touch on Suzanne's question there, I know with the ADSB requirement, back in January 1st of 2020, all aircraft, like fixed wing aircraft and the Florida categories of aircraft, excluding UAVs, it was mandatory by the FAA to have this ADSB installed in all these aircraft. So like I fly a Piper Warrior, well, we had to get that installed. So it was just an attachment that went into the dash. And it sounds like, based on what I've gathered from the FAA, there is going to be some sort of attachment, especially for like the DJI, the more popular drones where you can plug and play, and then it'll give off that ADSB signal is going to be required coming up. So I think there's something in the pipeline based on what I've gathered from some other folks in the industry as well, just not on the drone side, but just in aviation in general.
Okay, great. No, thanks for that input. That's, I would think they could come up with something pretty simply and make it adaptable. So yeah, good.
Any other questions for Dan? Last chance. Well, not hearing any, we will always keep respect for everybody's time and thank everyone, especially Dan, for taking the time today to enlighten us on their usage of the drones and give us that information. Just a reminder, the 24th, coming up in 2 weeks, Tom O'Mara will talk to us from the Big I regarding relationships between their independent agents and the mutuals. So look forward to that. That invite will be coming out here in the next week. And as always, if you have any new topics or any ideas you would like to hear a Zoom discussion on, please shoot me an email. Let me know. I'd be glad to set something up. So thanks again, Dan. Appreciate it. And everybody have a good afternoon.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. You bet.
Thank you.